Hey everyone, thanks for joining our live stream today on COVID-19, creating the perfect storm for cybercriminals. I'm excited to welcome our speakers today, Jonathan Krasner, Director of Business Development with Breach Secure Now, and Andres Ruz, Director of Information Security with Meriplex. Jonathan, kick us off.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And again, the title of today's presentation is the impact of COVID-19 on SMB security. So obviously, COVID has upset our world 6 ways from Sunday. And one of the primary impacts on your organization, most likely, is that you now have a lot of people working from home. And in fact, most of your organization might be working from home today. But even when the pandemic is over, most organizations think that in some cases, all of their employees will stay at home, or some of their employees will stay at home, or it might be a hybrid model of some people staying at home on some days and working in the office other days. So clearly, that's going to be a new normal. And so whenever there's such a tectonic change like this, we have to take a look at the way we're working and how it affects us from all kinds of different angles, certainly from a cybersecurity standpoint. Now, a couple of things to note is that when you're working at home, clearly there are a lot more distractions. We all know about dogs jumping in the middle of phone calls and kids coming in and all kinds of things like that happening. And so what that means is that there's much more likelihood of users being distracted. And distracted users are probably less secure because they don't pay quite as much attention because of the distractions. And the other big thing about working at home is that end users are not behind the corporate firewall, most probably, and they might not be using corporate issued equipment. They might be using their own personal equipment. And when they use their own personal equipment, their kids could have been on it. So we have a really big change in the cybersecurity environment. Next slide, please. So let's couple that with another very important fact, which is that humans, your employees, are the leading cause of data breaches. And I'd like to there are a lot of numbers and statistics on this, but a lot of times stories are more powerful than statistics. So if you all recall, about 2 months ago, there was an attack on Twitter whereby many, many major accounts were compromised. Now, I'm sure you saw the headlines on this, but I'm not sure if you know the backstory, right? So Twitter obviously has to be a very, very cybersecurity focused organization. But what wound up happening was that a few of their employees were tricked into giving up their credentials by a 17-year-old teenager in Florida. So just think about that and let that set in. A teenager in Florida hoodwinked one of the most sophisticated technology companies in the world. So if it can happen to Twitter, it can certainly happen to you. So that's a very, very important takeaway, because quite often smaller and mid-sized businesses think it can't happen to me. And without a doubt, it can. Next slide.
Thank you for that, and thank you for the kind of the great introduction on the problem statement, Jonathan. This is something that, when we talk to our customers and we talk about, okay, so why, what's going on, what are the current situations with cybersecurity, we explain them saying, okay, you will hear this news all over the place, and very, very, very important for your security is that you have a plan. And that plan is solid rock based on one of the cybersecurity frameworks. And at Meriplex, we use the Center for Internet Security, CSF. And when you talk about specifically the subject that we're going to focus today, which is the implementation of a security awareness and training program, this is part of their roadmap, part of their framework, and is control number 17. And why we tell people that they need this is because actually there's no silver bullet in cybersecurity, right? All these things, as you were saying, can happen to Twitter, can happen to anyone, and you have to make sure that you are protecting your organization and you are putting the efforts in the place that you should be putting the efforts to make sure that those things, at least you have a less chances of those things to happen to you. Now, when we talk about the implementation of an information security awareness and training program, there's a couple of things that with the program that we have, which Breach Secure now, that are important. Jonathan, why don't you tell us a little bit about these 5 things and these 5 steps?
Right. So from an overall philosophical standpoint, when you're talking about an end user security awareness training program, there's really 2 major things to think about. Number 1 is whether or not your end users are properly educated on all of the cybersecurity risks out there. And number 2, whether or not they're continuously reminded about this. Because as you could see with Twitter, it wasn't a question of education, right? Because I'm sure that the employees that gave up their credentials, it's not like they didn't know about cybersecurity, but they probably were not thinking about it. It was not top of mind. So we need end users to be educated, and we need cybersecurity to be top of mind. So that's what the overall strategy needs to be. So how do we go about doing this? So we believe that there are 5 basics to this. And the first thing I'm going to start with is the one in the middle, the bullet in the middle, security policies, right? Because whenever you're implementing a program, you need to have rules to the road. And in this situation, those rules are going to be guided by your security policies. What's acceptable and what isn't. Now, once you define that, included in those policies must be education, right? So every employee needs to be trained and measured on understanding cybersecurity basics. So what I mean by that is sometimes we see end users taking a class and that's it. They took a class. Well, but if you took a class and you don't test people, how do you know that they actually have the knowledge they're supposed to know? So we provide an annual cybersecurity training class that lasts about 45 minutes. It's updated every year, and end users need to take that class. Now, part and parcel with that is one of the main purposes of training people is to make sure that they don't get phished, right? So we all know what phishing is. So in order to make sure that end users properly can spot a phishing email, you have to send end users fake phishing emails and measure whether or not they're clicking on those emails. Now, going back, now I'm talking about the 4th bullet here, which is continuous reinforcement. So, bullet number 1 was education, and bullet number 4 is the reinforcement. So what we want to do is on a frequent but unintrusive basis is remind people weekly about IT security. And then finally, we have to measure all this. So from a training standpoint, we're asking people to ask questions to make sure they understand concepts. And from a phishing standpoint, we're trying to understand whether or not people are clicking on phishing emails. And so we need to be able to measure all this. And when we measure this, we can figure out from an aggregate standpoint, what is our organizational risk? And then we can also see which employees are disproportionately contributing to that risk. Next slide, please.
Very good, very good. So let's get a little bit deep in the concepts that we just described with Jonathan, right? So one of the key concepts that Jonathan explained was about the security awareness and training. And something important is this constant education on the users. And this needs to be content that is relevant, that is engaging for the users, not only to understand. If you create content that is super technical, then the users will disengage. This needs to be important for what they will face in the daily basis. Of course, that our program also has the ability to provide particular modules that are compliant related, like HIPAA compliance. And those modules should be associated with the specific roles within the organization. But again, the content of the training needs to be engaging, and it needs to be relevant for the people who is taking this training. And one thing also on this slide is that you have to make sure that you do the continuous training. Security cannot be something that you just do a spot check once a year, those 45 minutes, and then you're done. This needs to be constantly reinforced. This needs to be constantly kind of explained. This needs to be constantly remind to people, so they have this in the back of their minds. And again, the key concept here is you have to help your users. This is not about engaging with people to kind of notify them about what things they don't know. This is about helping them so they don't get in a situation that is going to be bad for them and bad for the company. So one of the major things that our solution also have is these phishing campaigns. And something important about the philosophical way of how we present phishing is, first you have to train, and then you have to phish, right? Help the users to be successful at their jobs. Don't try to point them out saying, hey, you have been phished, and again, with a red flag about why that happened. That's the opposite, right? Make sure that they will be successful in their jobs. So that's why you train and then you phish. And whenever you phish and you have an occasion where you phish, use those policies to make sure that you are talking to the people that is in your organization and making sure that they understand how they missed that and why it's important to pay attention to some of the indicators. Follow up with the people that is phishing, have a successful phishing. And make sure that, again, the key thing here on the phishing simulation is for them to practice the things that they're learning, for them to understand if they got phished, why that happened, help them see the indications of what things they should be paying more attention, and do reinforcement with them. And all this, the solution that we provide can do for you. As soon as someone phishes an email, they will be redirected to another page, which will explain them, will train them about why that happened and what things they have to pay attention, and why it's important that they pay attention to those things. With that, we talk a little bit about the measurement. We talk about a little bit about why this is important. So can you give us a little more on what the solution can provide for us, Jonathan, please? Oh, Rachel has a question. What are the most common attacks that cybercriminals target towards employees? I would say phishing is number one right now. Number one, 90-something% of I think it's 93% in the latest security reports that I receive is coming from phishing. So there's a lot of things that can happen when you have sophisticated hackers, ATP type of hackers, sometimes script kiddies, but phishing is the most easy way that someone can penetrate an organization. As you can imagine, is you need a single click. You need just one click, and that's where everything is gone. So I will answer that's, to me, phishing is the number one.
Yeah, I'll add on to that. There's two more very common attacks. One is a variation of phishing called vishing with a V, and that's voice phishing. So let me tell you a story about this. I heard of a law firm where, and this is sort of in conjunction with another very common form of attack called BEC, or business email compromise. Okay, so the concept of business email compromise is one in which the hackers go out and do and spear phishing. I apologize about all of these different types of attacks, but they're not always one or the other. The hackers really don't set things up very nicely for us in a bucket. Quite often they'll combine different techniques. But but there's something called spear phishing or whaling. Again, there's a lot of different ways to go about this. And what happened in this one story that I'll tell you about is that the hackers did research on a law firm. They figured out who the CEO was and the CFO, and they figured out who the IT company was. So they called up the CFO and they said, tomorrow we're doing a system upgrade, and I'm going to call you right before lunch tomorrow because I need to get into your system to do the upgrade. And the CFO said, sure, no problem. Right. And when they called, they probably impersonated the phone number of the IT company so that on the caller ID on the phone, it looked like it was coming from the IT support company, and they could actually get the names of the IT support company employees. So then the next day they call up and they say, hey, when you going to lunch? He says in about 15 minutes. And they go, oh, by the way, our systems are down. I need you to let me into your system so that we can get in and make the upgrade. It's no big deal. And so the CFO didn't think anything of it. So what happened was the hackers were able to get into the system for over an hour while the CFO went to lunch. They put in whatever they wanted into the network. And then afterwards, there was quite a significant amount of damage done. So there's all kinds of common attacks, and the damage can be significant. And so that's why it's important to really educate your end users on all this, because it only takes one small misstep to create a tremendous amount of damage. And that's one of the reasons why these cyber incidents, why many organizations sort of say it won't happen to me, because in their experience, they've never, it's a natural human reaction. So when people, when there's an infrequent event, general psychology for people is to sort of dismiss it and say, it's really not going to happen to me, even if that one event can be catastrophic in nature. So we're sort of trying to combat human nature here by providing proper cybersecurity education. So going back to this slide right here, it's very important to measure your company and the individuals in your company to make sure that they're properly trained on all of these different issues. So the story that I told you or something like that doesn't happen to your organization.
Jonathan, we have a question there from Jackson. I'm not sure if you want to address it or I can address it. It says, how can you help users understand how important it is to the company and for them personally?
Right. Andres, do you want to take that one or do you want me to?
I can take that one. So one of the things that a lot of the conversations that we have with our customers is why they need to be doing this, right? So a lot of people say, hey, everyone comes, knock my door, and they say that they need to put this new product from security. There are so many products. There's so much stuff that going on security that everyone is trying to break in this market because it's huge. The way that Meriplex does this for our customers, and honestly take a lot of pride also that we care a lot of the personal side too, is that we position our security products with a framework of reference. And in that way, whenever we go to the conversations with the customers, we tell them this is not because Meriplex is telling you to do it. This is because Meriplex is following a well-recognized framework that is telling you that you should be doing this. The Center for Internet Security has like over 20 years of experience in cybersecurity, and it's a collaboration of over 5,000 experts in security that we work together to pretty much upgrade that framework and have it as reference for everyone to use. So this is the way that I will explain the why. And the other thing is all the material that we present through the training, through the phishing campaigns are important things that you have to make them available for them to also use in their personal lives, for them to make sure that if they have a Gmail account, a Yahoo account, whatever they have, they understand that the same thing can happen with all the other accounts that they may have. So that's how you can help them also personally in the organization in position why they need something like this.
Yeah, I agree 100%. End user training and security awareness is well recognized in every cybersecurity framework out there, including the one that Meriplex uses. And the reason why it's so important is, again, I hate to harp on the story that I just told you, but the results can be absolutely catastrophic for an organization. And I'm sure that everybody on this call today doesn't have enough time in their day to do their job, right? Everybody's time starved these days. So just imagine that your organization gets hit with some type of cyber event. It will put you so far back. It's just something that you just never want to have happen to your organization. So as they say, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So that's really what's going on here.
Now, one initial thing on that is, let's remind our audience that there's some compliance regulations that they obligate you to have this, right? So, right. Of course, it's a good idea. Of course, it's part of your framework, and I hope it's part of your information security program roadmap. But for some organizations, it's an obligation for compliance purpose. Like HIPAA is one. If you have FIC, is another one. Again, you have a lot of different compliance. NERC is another one that you have to have this. So there's a lot of compliance that is going to also push you to have this in place.
And I'll give you one more. In the state of Texas, where you're based, the
Administrative Code 1. Yep.
Yeah, the Texas Department of Information Resources, the legislature passed a bill last year that every government employee in the state of Texas needs, and the companies that support them need to get cybersecurity training. So right in your backyard there, if you're dealing with the government, you need to get trained. And why did they do this? Because last year, on the same day or within a week, 22 Texas governments got hacked into within a very short period of time. And the legislature just said, we can't have this anymore. We need to get our government employees trained.
Yeah.
Okay. So another question is there a way to track employees that are actually doing the training? Yes, it's very simple, because after using our system, after someone takes training, they have to answer questions to show that not only have they taken the training, they understand it, right? Because we're not really looking for participation awards here, that somebody listened to something. We want to make sure that they understand it. And that's the bottom line. And so that's the purpose of this dashboard that you see here, where we show how employees are doing on the various components of the program, and then how they're doing in sum total. So by using a very easy to use and understand dashboard, and we have a score called the ESS score, which is the Employee Secure Score. So if you're just looking for a high level way to look at your organization, you can see what the Employee Secure Score is, which you can see in the box in the upper left. And then you'll be able to see how your organization is doing as a whole and how your employees are doing individually. And on the right-hand side, you'll be able to see employees that are marked in the red zone, and that's where you don't want to be, right? So this is how you can manage employees, see how they're doing, and then remediate as necessary. Now, we don't have enough time today to discuss how you do that remediation, but what we're doing here is taking the first big step, which is identifying your organization's weak points. And that's very, very important, because as you all know, you can't manage what you can't measure.
Correct. Okay, with that, let's go over our talking points and takeaways points for you guys to remember. These are the 4 things that, if you don't remember anything from what Jonathan and I have been speaking about, these are the 4 things. So Jonathan, why don't you start with the first 2?
Okay, I can't emphasize this enough. The first point is, you can't say, oh, I took the training last year, I don't want to take it again. That might be good for compliance. That's not good for cybersecurity. Based on human behavior, security awareness is continuous in nature. Now, that doesn't mean it's necessarily arduous, that it will take a significant amount of time and not give people time to do their jobs. That's absolutely not the case. But it does need to be done in a well thought out and continuous manner. And so in addition to training people and testing them on the training, you actually need to test them in the real world. You need to confront them with phishing campaigns and potentially phishing campaigns to make sure that at the moment of truth, when they're confronted with that attack, which will happen sooner or later, that they respond as they should.
Yeah, thank you for that. And the two last points here is the first one is the end user training should be and is a key part of cybersecurity program. So if you don't have an information security program, you should have one. And this is a key thing that you should be doing. It doesn't matter what vertical you are. It doesn't matter the size of your organization. This is a very important part of your program, and it should be present there. And the last thing that this our solution will provide, it will be a combination of the dark web, the phishing, and the training to provide you with this employee secure score that's going to give you a good idea on what is your organizational risk and who is the kind of the people that you maybe have to spend a little bit more time training and making sure they're up to speed, so you get out of the red and goes to everyone being on the green side on the equation for the ESS. And with that, we would like to thank you for your participation today. Please, please, please let us know if there is anything we can do to help you to better protect your organization with this program. Thank you, Jonathan. A pleasure. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.